Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the Wisconsin RTI Center, we'd like to welcome you to the Wisconsin RTI Center Mathematics webinar series. Our goal is to help you help your struggling students transform into math heroes. During this 8-webinar series, our goal is to help you to develop research-based structures and practices for intervening in mathematics. I'm Sarah Sum. I'm a Regional Technical Assistance Coordinator with the Wisconsin RTI Center, and I will be co-facilitating these sessions with my colleague Heidi Erstad. Each of these sessions will have us co-facilitating, as well as you'll be able to hear a school example of how they're doing this work back in their schools. So we want to welcome you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. There are a lot of us on the call today. There's about 202 people that were registered. So because of the vast number of attendees, we've limited the conversation to the chat box. So if you would like to communicate with us or with our school presenter, please make sure that you do that within the chat box. I will be doing a lot of the talking along with our district example, and Heidi Erstad will be managing a lot of the chat box today. So we're going to be looking at that to see if there's any big overarching ideas, and hopefully we'll be able to have some time at the end to have some Q&A about some of those big ideas. Also, do know that both Heidi and myself are available to answer any specific questions for you at any time. As you will see, we will be sharing our PowerPoint and other materials with you today. But our email addresses are on the second slide of the PowerPoint, as well as can be found on the Wisconsin RTI Center website. So we are just a phone call or an email away to help you do this work back in your schools and districts. Just a little bit of background about who's all here today. There are about 200 people who are registered, as I said. Out of the 200 participants, there are 74 schools and or districts in on this call today. One being from the largest, most urban district in our state, and some being some of the smallest, most rural districts in our state. So welcome to all of you who've taken the time to be here today. We have 7 of our 12 CISAs in our state represented here today. We have 2 institutes of higher education, as well as our colleagues from the Department of Public Instruction and some colleagues from the Wisconsin RTI Center. So again, welcome. The purpose of these webinars are to really help schools develop culturally responsive math intervention structures based on the Institute for Educational Sciences recommended practices. As you can see on my screen, there should be a picture of the IES practice guide, as we will refer to it as, and it's assisting students struggling with mathematics, response to intervention for elementary and middle schools. We're also going to be doing this work to extend to high school, knowing that there is need K-12 throughout our state. If you haven't already downloaded the IES practice guide, we would strongly suggest that you do that, as that will be the basis and the foundation to which we build the remaining webinars on. The series outcomes are really for you to know the recommended practices for students struggling to learn mathematics, also as a vehicle for you to be able to access or have access to math intervention research and resources. We also think it's very important for you to be able to connect with practitioners across the state, so we're really trying to build that into these hour-long webinars. And lastly, we want you to be able to create a plan to help improve your school's math interventions to better meet the needs of all kids. You'll see now our webinar dates and topics. The first one is just an RTI overview, and we're going to be digging deeper into screening. Knowing that a lot of you already have screening processes in place in your district, but also knowing that that is one of the first steps in determining the needs of our students in our building, that we thought that we really would need to start there and build upon that when we're talking about providing interventions for students who are struggling in mathematics. A couple things we'd like you to note. Please note that the webinars are all connected and should be viewed as connected elements and practices that should be in an intervention. These practices that we're going to be sharing with you over the course of this year can be a complement to maybe a program that you have in place, or even used as a structure for how you're building your interventions. They're designed to be part of a series, so really it's our hope that you can take part in all of the webinars. And because of that, we know of your very, very busy schedules. Please do note that the webinars are going to be recorded and they will be housed on our website. And I do know that Heidi, throughout the day or throughout our webinar, is going to be putting that direct link into the chat box. If you do seem to miss that, though, don't worry. You can just go to our homepage, the Wisconsin RTI Center's homepage after tomorrow morning, and you can be able to directly link right into those webinars, the taped webinars, as well as the resources. So in moving forward, we're just going to get into right now an RTI overview, just to make sure that we all have common language and common understanding of what that RTI framework is within our state. The Wisconsin RTI Center, the vision is that all students in Wisconsin will learn and be successful in life. We're preparing our students for that college and career readiness. Our mission with the Wisconsin RTI Center is to build the capacity of Wisconsin schools to develop and sustain a culturally responsive, multi-level system of support to ensure the success for all students. And really, we can't say that enough, that we want to ensure success for all kids in our state. What is response to intervention? It's really an organizational framework that really guides the implementation of a culturally responsive multi-level system of support so that all students have both academic and behavioral success. I'm sure many of you have seen this graphic that depicts the RTI framework in the state of Wisconsin. Many people call it the golden ring or the hockey puck or the donut, but really it shows what that multi-level system of support is within our state. It's comprised of 3 different levels, and we're really starting with that universal level. That represents instruction, collaboration, and assessment practices that we have for all students. It's very important that at that universal level, we know that that's that first level of support, and that is for all of our kids. That selected level of support, or some people may refer to as Tier 2, are those practices that we have in place for students who are moderately above or below benchmark. Continuing, though, to infuse high-quality instruction, assessment practices, collaboration into all of those supports that you have at that selected level. That intensive level of support, or even Tier 3 as people call it, it's for very few students in our system. It's for students who are significantly above or below benchmark. That's really for those kiddos that keep you up at night. When we talk about that multi-level system of support, we're talking about providing supports for all of our kids to make sure that they can have success at that universal level. When we're talking about providing that multi-level system of support, we're also making sure that we are employing culturally responsive practices, being aware of the students that we serve, and making sure that we are meeting their needs as individual students. We talked too about thinking, when we look at our Wisconsin graphic, we want to think about providing a continuum of supports. So what is going to be needed for all of our students, or for each student in our school, to have success back at that universal level? We know that we want 100% of our students to have access to the universal level. Our goal should be 100% of students to have success at the universal level, but knowing that that may not always be the case, so how can we create that safety net to meet the needs of all of the kids that we serve? There's a few principles for what RTI is in the state of Wisconsin. And the first is that RTI is for all children and all educators. We want to make it clear about that RTI is for all children and all educators. People often ask, is RTI a gen ed or special ed initiative? It's an all-child initiative. We want to make sure that when we say all students, we mean all genders, races, gifted students, students with disabilities. We're looking at all kids. Again, we want to ask ourselves to make sure that we are ensuring equitable access to educational opportunities by asking ourselves some questions. Do all students in each grade level have access to high quality instruction aligned to their grade level standards? Do all students in each grade level have access to the same resources aligned to their grade level standards? Are all students treated equitably when responding to educational and behavioral needs? We also want all educators to reflect on and implement effective practices by asking themselves, does our instructional style represent the needs of the learners in our classroom? Do we use authentic assessments based on taught materials to determine students' level of success? And do we use heterogeneous grouping to reduce segregation, stereotyping, and to improve student self-efficacy and opportunities? The second principle for RTI is that RTI must support and provide value to effective practices. It's our goal that we want you to honor what's already working in your system and continue to build on that success. This isn't about completely starting over. You have some effective practices in place. It's your job to identify them and keep them as part of your practice. And looking critically at those effective practices, you must also recognize what isn't working and be able to let go of those practices. We talk about the third principle for RTI. The success for RTI lies within the classroom through collaboration. It's imperative that our school and district leadership create schedules that provide collaboration time for teachers as well as collaboration among stakeholders within the school. If it's not part of a current system, that should be something that should be put on your to-do list when building your intervention supports. This collaboration is a non-negotiable and successful RTI implementation. RTI is a framework that supports both academic and behavioral success for all of our kids. RTI supports and provides value to the use of multiple assessments to inform instructional practices. If we're making decisions about kids, we need to be making sure that we're looking at multiple sources of data and assessments. The sixth principle is RTI is something that you do and not necessarily something that you buy. There is no RTI in a box. It's an organizational framework that's going to help your system meet the needs of all kids. Within that, there's two types of change, technical and adaptive. That technical change is putting solutions to problems for which they know the answers. That could be as simple as purchasing a new resource, like a new textbook. That adaptive change is really addressing problems for which you don't know the answers to. An example of that would be using coaching as part of professional development. Wisconsin's vision for RTI requires both adaptive change in addition to those technical changes. When we talk about that over the next 8 webinars, we really want you to think not just about those technical pieces, but also about what are some of those adaptive changes that need to occur back in our schools and districts. And the last principle for RTI in Wisconsin is that RTI emerges from and supports research and evidence-based practice. We talk about research-based, that's programs, strategies, and assessments shown to be effective in rigorous scientific studies. When we talk about those evidence-based, that's the programs, strategies, and assessments shown to have had positive outcomes in many of our schools. So we've included a quote from the RTI Action Network as a reminder to all of us that within this framework, all students should have access to the universal level. If we don't address the universal level first, we're missing the opportunity to create the biggest impact on student achievement. Other levels of support for students who are struggling must come from and support success at the universal level. You can't intervene your way out of ineffective universal level of support. That's the first step of that multi-level system of support for all students. We know that a strong universal level is necessary, but again, that it's not always going to be sufficient for all of our students. You may have heard the saying, as we just said it, you can't intervene your way out of universal level or tier 1. We've also heard people across the state complain that RTI is all about interventions, and we understand that confusion as the I in RTI does stand for intervention. However, as this has started to evolve in our state, we've heard many other schools and professionals change that letter I in the acronym to meaning something like I squared, meaning response to instruction and intervention. The framework in Wisconsin has created that golden ring, which represents that multiple levels of support. And the first and foremost level being at that universal level, which is instruction that all students receive. With that being said, we also know that this effective framework requires more than just universal instruction. We know that in school settings, we'll have students coming to school and experiencing school with different background knowledge, different experiences, varying beliefs and styles and skills. Our job is to provide our students with the supports necessary to learn and grow. For some of our students, more than just the universal level of support is necessary, temporarily or periodically, so that they can achieve and reach the expectations. So it's really important that we think about that and provide multiple safety nets to ensure equitable access and success for all of our students. So again, even with those strong universal levels of supports, as long as our schools are organized as age-based with limits on numbers of the days and hours of instruction, we know that we're going to continue to see students who will still need additional support to be successful. And we also know that few students in our schools will need that intensive support to be successful. So that was just a little bit of background in a nutshell on the RTI framework within our state of Wisconsin. Now what we'd like to do is get into today's featured practice. And today's featured practice from the IES Practice Guide is to screen all students to identify those at risk for potential mathematics difficulties. So what our plan is for this morning is we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what that means. So what does the research say about screening? Universal screening is a process in which data from multiple measures are analyzed to determine whether each student is likely to meet, not meet, or exceed academic benchmarks or behavioral expectations. Screening process is also used to gauge the effectiveness of our universal level of instruction and support. So a couple of things to keep in mind as we proceed. Screening is a process, it's not a test. Effective screening systems consider every student in the school at regular intervals. Secondly, it's really important to honor multiple forms and sources of data in your decision-making process. The purpose of this process, of this screening process, is to help us determine whether and which kids are on track to meet the outcomes that we have in mind for them, which kids are not on track, and which kids have already exceeded our expectations. And beyond the use of this process for students, we can also look at this process to help us take a look at our school as a whole. Our leadership teams, in conjunction with teacher-led teams, can use screening data to help gauge the overall health of our universal level of instruction. It's very important that we also are being culturally competent in our screening process. And really, that first starts with believing all students will learn. I would like to even challenge all of you who are in on this conference call today to really think that believing that all students must learn. When we believe and say that all students must learn, we're really placing that locus of responsibility on the professional and the institution. And when we're doing that, we're more attuned to begin to examine the systems, structures, and policies for their impact on all students within our schools. This next slide really just shows, it takes that golden ring that depicts the RTI framework in our state, and it rolls it out into a roadmap. And if you look on that far left-hand side of the screen, it really talks about how it really starts with our screening process. And that question is the student on track to meet or exceed the identified outcomes? And from there, it lays out what your system is going to look like dependent on student need. For those students who are on track, how are we going to continue to match supports to their need? Students are well below or above, or moderately below or above, then it lets us to verify the need. Okay, what is that underlying need? And then as we're digging deeper, how then can we match supports to student needs? And again, it talks about all students, regardless of level, should have instruction, collaboration, and balanced assessment within that multi-level system of support. Again, the recommendations, there's 3 recommendations that come to us about screening out of the IES Practice Guide. And the 3 recommendations are, as a district or school, you should be setting up a systematic screening system, having a team evaluate potential screening measures for efficiency, reliability, and predictive validity. In grades 4 through 8, you should be using screening data in combination with state testing results. And lastly, you should select screening measures based on the standards with an emphasis on the focused priorities. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into each of those three components, or those three recommendations. So first, that systematic screening process. Being systematic is having a consistent approach and response. So when we talk about systematic, we're meaning that we create processes that ensure that we respond to students according to a school-wide plan rather than according to the discretion of individual teachers. Do we provide consistent responses if asked to explain the steps that our school takes when students have difficulty learning or have already exceeded our grade level or course benchmarks? So just to pause for a second, I want you to think about, is your screening process back in your school and district, is that systematic? And we'll just give you just a minute to think about that. And if not, think about what could be done in order to make that more of a systematic process. As we're moving forward, here's a few other questions that we've posted on the screen for you. We want you to just stop and think. There's three questions. Are decision rules specific and consistent around classrooms, going back to that systematic screening process? The second one is for you to reflect on what materials and procedures will be used in your systematic screening process. And the last question is going to have you dig a little bit deeper in your screening process. What will happen if too many children perform below criterion during the screening process? Are you disaggregating to look into your subgroups of students? And what will happen if you see that there's a discrepancy between different subgroups of students performing on your screeners? So just some food for thought for you to think about. And what I'm going to do is just give you a minute to jot down some answers or some reflections based on the three questions that are on your screen. And moving forward, as I'm sure many of you are aware, screening's been around in elementary schools for some time and has a pretty solid research base. At the elementary level, we tend to use screening as a predictor for what students will be at risk for mathematic difficulties. In grades K through 4, the research-based practice is that you use existing data and administer a standardized screener multiple times per year. At the secondary level, you're drawing more from what's emerging as promising practices in screening. Generally, by the secondary level, math difficulties are well established, so existing data is best practice to universally screen from 4th grade and up. In particular, we are drawing from the work from the National RTI, the National Center on RTI, as well as the National High School Center. When we talk about that promising practice above 4th grade on using existing data to screen students multiple times per year, we really want to look at what data could we use for that. We want to make sure that data is valid, so does it measure what it claims to measure? Does it have predictive power? Does it use data accurately to tell us who's on track, who's not on track? Is it standardized? So is there a given process for collecting and reporting data across the system? Is it efficient? Is it repeatable? Can you use the same measure over time for comparisons? Is it related to benchmarks? We want to be able to state with some certainty that if students are at such and such of a data point, that they're on track to meeting the college and career readiness requirements. And then norms. You want to be able to localize the data to your system for your students. So there is something at the secondary level called the Dropout Early Warning Systems, or DEWS. It's one of the resources in WiseDash. It's a powerful tool which even houses map results, and it really allows you to look at that data in conjunction with your more local up-to-date data. It's considered part of an RTI system. It works for students in 6th through 9th grade. And again, it really allows you to determine what students are at risk of late graduation or dropout. And it looks at students from their attendance, their discipline, their mobility, their state assessments, as well as could even dig deeper into student grades. However, we would caution you that if you're using student grades as part of that, that there is some consistency in how grades are given, that there's some systematic processes in place for that so that we're not mislabeling students who may need support. Next, and moving on, we want to make sure that your screening measures are based on the standards with an emphasis on the critical instructional objectives for each grade. So the screening should be really closely aligned with the expectations for learning in the classroom at that point in that instructional program. We really want to make sure that we are aligning them to what were the NCTM focal points and now are the focused priorities of the Common Core State Standards. We also want to make sure that for primary students, we're focusing in on those whole number concepts. For intermediate students, we're really focusing in on those rational numbers. And we also really want to make sure that whatever it is that we are screening or intervening on, that we're really working on progression towards algebraic readiness. The standards for mathematical practice, when we think about making sure our screeners are aligned to our content, we should really look first and seeing if they're aligned to those standards for mathematical practice. Those standards for mathematical practice are really the habits of mind of a mathematically proficient student and really should be the cornerstone to which we build our grade level content. So when we are screening our students, we want to make sure that there are opportunities for them to attend a precision, to model with mathematics, to persevere in solving problems, reason abstractly and quantitatively, and that there's opportunities for them to engage in the mathematics as part of the screening process. Also, when we talk about what should we be screening, what's that content, how do we align that content, we want to look at those focused priorities in mathematics. And this chart comes to us from Achieve the Core, and it really just shows what those focused priorities are in each grade level band. This is just another example if you were to go to Achieve the Core and go to Focus. It helps us to see what are, this is an example of 6th grade, but allows us to see what are those major clusters, which are the green clusters, what are the supporting clusters, and what are the additional clusters. And really trying to make sure that we are aligning to really what those major clusters are at each grade level. The next one I know may be difficult to see, but we really, again, are talking about that progress of students to algebraic readiness in grades K-8. This is great to see what skills students need to be working on, as well as a way for us to dig deeper and to backtrack about what skills we may need to fill with some of our students based on the results that we get from our screening results. So as a quick reflection, we would like to know, are your current screening practices aligned to the recommendations? You can either jot that in the chat box for about 1 minute. We'll give you one minute to do that. Put that in the chat box, or you could just jot for yourself. But we'll just give you a minute pause before we get into today's featured presenter. So now what we'd like to do is share how does this look in practice. Our featured presenter is Lisa Crone from the Johnson Creek School District. She's the Director of Teaching and Learning. She's going to explain how their school district has evolved and continue to refine their screening practices to a place of where they are now. Their screening practices, their implementation of a multi-level system of support, or that RTI framework, has evolved over time. Their screening process began in the 2010-11 school year when they first introduced NWEA math assessment. You're going to hear about their current process and how it's used to identify students both above and below benchmark, as well as allow them to analyze the strength of their overall universal level. Just knowing that this is one school district in the state of Wisconsin who has some solid practices in place. We know that all systems vary based on student need, so we'd really like you to hear her story, and as you're thinking about that, think about what can you do to maybe make some changes to your overall screening process to better meet the needs of all of your students. And at this point, I am going to turn it over to Lisa.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Crone and I work with the Johnson Creek School District. We pride ourselves on that we are moving towards the personalization of academics, and hopefully today I can take you through the process of how we got there. I know that in my presentation I will miss components and you may have questions that come up, so please do not hesitate to contact me at any time, because our journey and our experiences are only as strong as we can share them with others. As we look, we did start in 2011 and 12 with the RTI framework. MAP NWEA came in at 2010, and that was the first screener in which the district started to discuss looking at data. When I joined the district in 2011, at that point we truly did not have grade level or district level systematic assessments. The first step was for us to define our universal screeners to build that systematic and consistency within a system for fidelity and validity. The critical component to building a meaningful picture of a student utilizing data was to have a triangulation. Each data point needed to have other data points to either support or negate the findings. This triangulation of data and how it fits into our defined RTI process will be shared later in this presentation. I would like to take a moment to pause and articulate to you that when I, in this presentation, share the we, I'm referring to teachers that at this time are now truly math-focused teachers. I'm referring to building leaders as well as myself, where we in our district do not have interventionists. I feel that there is a need and a lead of a person to be the overseer of data and the communication of leading the conversations until the teachers become leaders themselves within that data, and you will see how we got there as well. So one of our universal screeners that we brought in initially is the NWEA Measures of Academic Progress. We have now joined on to the web-based as well as aligned to the Common Core State Standards. With that, we now currently have depth of knowledge assessments in K through 9. I'll share what those mean as we proceed in the presentation. As well as in K5, we have fact fluency, which has an asterisk, and I will explain that further. We utilize ALEKS in 6 through 8 and Khan Academy in 9th. These 3 points of data allow us to do a comparison to ensure that we have the consistency and validity between the 3. We do these assessments 3 times per year in fall, winter, and spring. I will get the question at times that how do we utilize so much time to assess with universal screeners for all students 3 times per year? And I do clearly indicate that between math and reading, it is a total of 6 hours out of over 1,000 hours of instructional time that we are utilizing. And these 6 hours give us the most powerful information because we are utilizing that data for academic means. Some will then say, well, then on top of that, you have state assessment. We could even still round that number to 10 hours per year on assessment that makes instructional decisions, and that still does not outweigh the 1,000+ hours of instructional time. So I truly stand by our 3 times per year and feel that what it gives us is more than those 10 hours could ever understand. We also had to develop decision-making criteria once we collected those universal screeners. That is the key component because it takes now the data into instructional practices versus just information. When we look at the critical component of the decision-making criteria, we really needed to define it out in the beginning process. We have the 3 pieces that I shared with you of the triangulation. Our goal is that all students are being assessed at their age grade level. By being assessed at their age grade level allows us to see what tier of instruction they fall within. The critical component for me, as well as our district, was to see how we nationally fell, so we needed a nationally normed assessment from our point of view. In the NWEA map, we looked at 2 places. On target students and below target students. We put them into the percentiles and looked specifically at their percentile of testing of where they fall in comparison to the grade level peers. And our depth of knowledge, which I'll share with you what that is as we move on. We also looked at as our on target is within 1.25 years of current grade level, indicating that if they have a delay or an advancement, they are within 1.24, they're being met within the universal through differentiation. If they were below, that indicated that there may be further decision making needed. We also looked at fact fluency. This has some automaticity components to it, and feeling that it's a foundational component, it was part of our universal screener. We currently are looking at that to move into our diagnostic assessment, and we're piloting right now STAR Math to see what does it provide a validity point for us in comparison to our other 2 points. That as well has criteria that I'll share with you in a moment. What it came to discussion and review is if 2 out of those 3 screeners are below target, we then contact the next step. In mathematics, our interventionist became a conversation with an RTI team initially, and then we put in further diagnostic assessment. What MAP NWEA truly gave us after we realized that the percentile was just a component to put students in areas of support was that not only did we want to articulate what students needed for learning, we wanted to see that all students showed growth through the year. Sarah referenced that 100% of our students should learn and that we should be moving them forward, that there should be no reason they should not, in so many words. And I reference that because I truly feel 100% of our students will show academic growth per year. And so when we look at students, we look at what is their projected growth from the nationally normed group, and that's in the chart on the right, and what was their true RIT growth. We investigate what would be those components. If it's a 1-point difference, is a lot different than a negative growth. We have deep conversations on this data. We look at trends. We look at the bottom, if you will see the mathematical strands. What areas is a student showing the biggest strength in? What areas is a student showing the most growth needed? We would then focus on that. Our conversations have grown from what percentile do they fall in and how are we going to give them as many minutes as they need to meet the initial RTI components to What are we going to do for all students to move them forward? Within MAP, it breaks it down by RIT range into skills. We utilize those skills to then decide and moving forward, are these areas true skills that they're not performing, or was it in this specific test they did not perform? We have created consistent exit slips that allow us to find the proficiency. Are we able to find it elsewhere if it's not being shown on a certain universal screener? So now we've taken our universal screener and have taken it deeper into instructional practices. The other piece of our triangulation, we utilize what is called Rocket Math. It comes from Donald Crawford out of the Otter Creek Institute. It's been around since 2009 within Instructional Solutions. What it has done is done a very big research-based component on fluency and automaticity and how that affects mathematics success, as well as how does writing numbers affect their ability to be successful on time tests. Every student's goal for their time test varies depending on how fast they can write. I linked that on at the end of the presentation so you can also see that research. So we set expectations of proficiency by the end of the year by each grade level. If the students do not show proficiency in that, they continue moving forward. However, we see how much does that affect by using the triangulation of the other universal screeners, their success. We take in consideration there's electronic versions. Some students would use that better than the handwriting piece. But it's truly about how does that support their learning, and we know knowing math facts is important as they advanced in mathematics. We do also understand that once we're working on long division and we want to focus on long division, there are times to give a student a calculator if they're doing the simple facts but learning a larger aspect. But again, this universal screener gives us a look into what students are able to do and possibly areas that we need to focus in on. The DOK, depth of knowledge component, came from a study that we've currently done on the cognition-based assessment and teaching. This series has many different components of strands of mathematics. This is also linked at the end. What this does is provides us an understanding compared to the Common Core State Standards of where a student should fall by age grade. Age grade would give them a level. From that age grade level, we're able to go into the resource and find mathematical problems that would show their understanding. It allows us to do interviews and investigate their knowledge and what level do they fall on. If their level falls at a 1.24 below or above where they're supposed to be, that indicates possibly a next step if our triangulation has 2 out of the 3 that meet that. It has been a component that teachers, we really had to do a lot of book study, conversations, and professional development on, but the resources it provides has been wonderful. What we've done after we've had the triangulation of this data is we've taken it into action plans. And the action plans has provided us a true individualization of student learning. With that goal that all students will grow, what we have found is we can say students are going to grow so many points, or they're going to show us proficiency in these standards, but we never had what is the action that takes place. So we're at the point at this year that every teacher had met and they've created action plans for every student that they work with, and then we'll check at after our winter universal screening to see have those students met the next level in growth, and how did our action plan support that, or how did it not support that? So it's truly about what we have learned through the process, and where did we start and where are we now. I feel that every component of where we started we would not be where we are today unless we started there. So when we started with the RTI in the 2011 and 12, we went into very specific and defined our tiers and the minutes at that time. This link will also be available for you. We came in at 2013 and we said, okay, we need the multiple level system of support. We utilized the survey on the RTI website. We really dug into what does it mean to have support for all students? What do universals truly give us? Once we get that data, what are we going to do? So we made a very systematic, in our mind, approach to when we get that data. A lot of arrows, a lot of options. Where we come to today is after that, or let me pause for a moment, after we had that Tier 2 and Tier 3 in them defined, we also had a servicing handbook that we had put together. In that handbook, it defines each of our levels and what it means and what are the expectations, so teachers were all on the same page. We had conversations. What does that mean to our grade level? From there, where we are today, is we decided through PD conversations, digging into the data, that the best way to meet students is within a multi-age in our district. This doesn't mean that you jump in. It took us, we are now in our 3rd year of it in our 2 through 5, 2nd year in our K1. And what it truly means is that in 2 points of our day, in math and reading, their peer group is academic readiness. That means in 2nd through 5th grade, if their learning goal is the same, a 5th grader and a 2nd grader could be in the same class. It doesn't mean the 5th grader is meeting a 2nd grade outcome. It could mean that, but it also could mean that a 2nd grader is meeting a 5th grade outcome. It took off the barriers on both sides. It allowed us to meet our students that were Tier 3 on the extension, as well as Tier 3 in the intensive. We looked at utilizing the academic data. We create the learning goals that are aligned to Common Core. It talks about how we use those screeners and observation. Students can move at any moment and any time. It also allows us to vary our instruction based off of behavioral needs. Student placement is not only on academic readiness, but also behavioral readiness. Are they ready for that instruction on maturity, on can they function in that environment, etc. So that piece is where we are at today. Sorry, my one box keeps popping up, so it's distracting me. In 6 through 8, where we're at. We are moving to multi-age because our 5th grade is moving into our middle school, so we will have multi-age 5, 6, and 7, 8 next year. But what we are currently doing to meet the needs of the multiple areas is that in middle school, all 6th graders are in the same class at the same time. We went from 45-minute classes to 90-minute classes. So students now in mathematics take 90 minutes of math every single day. And within that 90 minutes, they have the fluidity between classes off of the data and their needs in those areas to move between 3 teachers of learning goal focus. Our data in our middle school after the 1st year we did this, all students in the universal screeners met 100% growth that was predicted for them. We went from teachers teaching everything to focus area teachers. We are currently in a system that I have a math team and I have a literacy team. Those teachers range from K-8. Currently, I'm showing you K-5. Our special ed teachers are also in the focus areas as well. We have them co-teaching and team teaching in the rooms in which they're where the support is needed for IEP components. We have then all math teachers in grade level based are either science and engineering, application, or writing. But since we're focusing on math, I will just stay focused on math. So we have our 2 through 5 math focus team that they teach 2 sections of math every day. So that's 2 80 minutes sections of 2 different groups of students meeting their needs. And that is all purely based off of their universal screeners and their academic readiness. These teachers have been able to really become strong mathematic teachers and are able to meet the needs not only of their students but also of what they need to do to become stronger as teachers. We started with data walls. I can't tell you enough how much and how important that was for our learning and our process. We started with the science trifold walls. We did observations, we had conversations, we looked at grade level students. Now we're at the place where we're no longer just looking at a grade, we're looking at a grade band, and we're looking now at areas of students that are in those grade bands. What we did to provide that next step is we realized when we went multi-age, we no longer fit for an age level report card. So we developed our action plans, which I shared before, and we are now K-8 live with our student proficiency profiles. The student proficiency profiles, every student has starting kindergarten and going through 8th grade. It is live 24 hours for parents to see and check and for students to also know. Teachers update them as students show proficiency in each of their standards. I will give you an example. This example student right now is working on level 5 and entering level 6. They do not have to have a full blue circle to enter the next level. When we go into level 5, for example, you will see all of the Common Core main components and each of the standards aligned. When we look here, anytime a student shows proficiency, the teacher then marks a P in their area, the percentage changes, and then they send out a comment, and it's an automatic send to parents that get an email that they receive in their inbox that their student has shown proficiency on a new mathematical strand. If there's comments we want to write in there, if they show it on map but they're not showing it in the classroom, so we're going to still wait and do some additional assessments before we mark proficiency. That is something we communicate. So this has now become our traditional report card into our proficiency-based constant profile for a student. So no longer does a student typically have to say, I'm in 3rd grade, so I should be in math level 3. It is where are they at academically and how are you going to support them to move on to the next level. We started out with RTI teams. It was a critical component. We needed to understand our first steps and how we're moving forward and what group of students we were looking at. But with that RTI team, what occurred was we needed more on our universal. So all of the things of the change, if you truly see, it's a change of our universal. And through that change of our universal and our instructional practices, our need for our Tier 3 has minimized to 4 to 10 students, 2 through 5 that we're supporting. Tier 2 is within our universal at this point because we're meeting their need at a multi-age. We went from, we went from large group instruction to workshop model in mathematics. The critical foundation of that is that we have all of the mathematical practices happening live in the classroom. I attached in our resources the resources for that. We went from textbook-driven academics in K-5 to, lack of a better term, we divorced the textbook, and we went to student academic readiness-driven education. We truly balanced every learning plan off of their needs. We have one-to-one technology with Chromebooks in 2 through 5. We utilize resources. I'll give you an example of one lesson plan that's typically pushed out to a group of students all needing the same needs. It's pushed out through their Gmail, and in here they have the different areas of how they're going to go through the process of learning. At the same time, in workshop model, they meet with their teacher and have guided group. This again will be available for you on the link of the different components and resources. We are continuing to learn each and every day, and we look at the data as a whole overall and make adjustments. We set goals, and teachers, their buy-in is unbelievable, and they take passion, and sometimes I feel like I'm working myself out of a job because they are the ones owning it so much. The students in personalizing academics, are really about what we've developed for our students as their student proficiency profile. You'll have the opportunity to look at our student learning continuum. It's where students set their goals for learning off of what their student proficiency profile indicates. And I also shared some exit slip examples of when we're doing some consistent looks at the depth of knowledge in one strand. And then the last piece, because I want to save time for questions, you'll have the resources that I referenced at your disposal to look through. The one thing I want to bring your attention to is we did in the 2011 year, we did receive an MSP grant that allowed me to really work with my teachers and give them the depth of knowledge of the content that they needed to be successful in math. In here is a resource link of a presentation that we had, was one of our class sessions, and it has wonderful videos, resources, etc., that you or your teachers can utilize to help this process get started or to, again, meet the needs of students. I will turn it back over to Sarah at this time. Thank you so kindly for listening, and I am more than happy to share whatever I can with all of you.
All right, I'm just going to start talking as we are switching screens back over to me. Hopefully you were able to get some knowledge of some of the screening processes and screening practices that are in place at Johnson Creek. When Lisa talked about her screening process, and thank you very much, Lisa, for giving us such detailed information, but that wasn't just used to place students in interventions. It's also being used to determine where the students are, and then they use it to determine what next do our students need. As well as through the evolution of their screening process, they've really used that screening process as a way to analyze the overall effectiveness of their universal level of instruction, and thus have made some pretty drastic changes into what is occurring for all students at that universal level. So what we're going to do now is just share some additional resources. Please note that all of those additional resources are listed here, as well as I believe Heidi has shared through the chat all of the other resources that you can link onto. Lisa shared a wealth of resources, so please know that those are all accessible for you as well. What we'd like to do before we quickly get into some Q&A, if there are Q&A questions, if you're looking at your screening practice and you still are thinking we need to really solidify what supports are at that universal level, we do have a 3-day mathematics training coming up in Waukesha on February 10th, 11th, and 18th. If you want any more information on that, please take a look at the flyer that's in the PowerPoint, or contact Heidi or myself for more information on that. We also have a screening in progress monitoring training that's coming to Milwaukee or Janesville this year. Again, if you want any more information on those, please don't hesitate to ask us. What we'd like to do is see, are there any overall questions that anyone has that they would like to type in the chat box before our 1 minute is up? If there's anything that is pressing for you, if you would like to just chat with us or email Heidi or myself, that would be great. So we're just monitoring the chat right now. If you don't have any questions, on behalf of Heidi and myself, we would like to thank you for taking the time to be a part of our webinar to learn a little bit more about that deepening your screening process. Next session is on our next session is in November, and that will be on using motivational strategies in interventions. So again, we'd like to thank you for your time, and if you want to type in any questions, you can stay on. Otherwise, have a wonderful day. Thanks.